Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my panel. And the panel today is about adding a touch of mystery to your costume. So, if you're making a costume, most of the time, you're making a costume, and that's it. You just sewn it, and you think, okay, I'm done with it. But today, I'm going to teach you there are different methods and how you can integrate even more details. So, let's give it a start. And let's take a look at the summary. Not going to read it. This is the things that we're going to check today. This is just an easy thing for me to read. But the real question for today is, why would we go the extra mile? I mean, we already made our costume, or we have already bought our costume. Why would we go the extra mile? Well, it is very simple. In marketing, they use a specific term called the multisensory experience to differentiate as a brand. So a clothing store, for example, they would integrate scent, the smell, and of course music to play with people's minds. Play with people's minds so that they stay in the store for far longer. And the longer someone stays in the store, the more they're going to buy. And we as cosplayers are gonna abuse that same technique. And a lot of research has been done for this, and today we're going to try and tackle it and to try to integrate it into our own costumes. Good. We're going to tackle 4 subjects for today. The first one, can anyone give me the first one? I give you a symbol, but how would you explain this symbol? Any idea? Sight, yeah, okay, definitely. Next to it, smell. Touch, and hearing. Good. Oh, you're a good class. I like that. So, those are the 4 principles that we're going to cover. In any moment of the presentation, these icons will show. That means that we're going to cover these items. And if I'm talking about a certain subject, it might be a combination of these things. So if you're not sure what we're talking about, because we have 50 minutes, and if I keep on talking for 50 minutes, at a certain point you're going to zone out. It's normal. You can just see it on the presentation. It's just a way to help you out. Good. Why would you go the extra mile? Competitions. If you want to stand out as a brand, in marketing, you do it, but if you want to stand out as a cosplayer, you can also do it. Especially in contests, going the extra mile will differentiate you. So people are like, oh yeah, that's the guy that smells like that certain smell. They will remember it. Or that's the guy that makes a lot of noise. Not because he's crazy, but because he knows his character that well that he can bring it to life in other ways. So indeed, differentiate from other contestants. You can also use it for for taking pictures. So if you're taking pictures for TikTok or social media, some of these methods help. Of course, smell is very difficult, and there is no technology for it, so that will be difficult, but it will show. It will definitely show, nonetheless. All the effort you're going to put into it will show, and people are going to appreciate it. And of course, it will spark a conversation. People will keep talking about your costume for days. At least I hope so. And that's what we're going to try and push. Now, be aware, every character is different, so it's very important that you guys also do the research, investigate which tools you best to use, and of course, have fun doing this. I mean, if you're not having fun, why are you even cosplaying? We're doing this because we want to have fun. So we're going to try and integrate as much as possible. But the most important part of these 3 things is, of course, do the research. And not only about the character, but about the environment and the history that goes behind it. Because that's a very important thing to do, a very important thing to know, because if you know the history behind the character or the history behind the costume, it will help you guys make the step of choosing the right materials. Good. How do we add mystery? There are 4 steps. 4 steps of how to add mystery. We can do it either with materials, wear and tear, staining, and scenting. How does that work? If we just take a look at materials. We as a cosplayer, we want to make a character, and from the point that we want to make a character, our choices are very important, because every choice that we make, every material that we choose, will of course decide how we have to handle it. For example, if you use an authentic fabric, you know how the material works. Online you'll find instructions how to work with it, and most of the time you find garments that already have the authentic style. So, an example of this is this fabric. Is anyone want to make a guess which fabric I have shown here on the board? It's linen, yeah, exactly, yeah. So linen, it's a very authentic material, and it's often used in things like shirts. It could also be cotton, but I think it's linen. Then we have a shapeable material, which is also very different, and I have this fabric. Anyone want to make a guess? Fake leather, yeah. Why is fake leather shapeable is because it is not really leather, but you can use other materials to shape it in a certain shape. And if you use real leather, you can also most definitely shape it, because if you make leather wet, you can form it into all weird shapes. If one of my fellow guests would have been here, I would have shown the little bag that he's wearing. It's all leather shaped, and it's such a complicated procedure that it's a very interesting idea to use that in the contests. So keep that in mind if you're choosing a material. Faux leather over real leather, it's a choice, but it will decide how you're going to tackle your project. And then sometimes, this is a thing I normally have, I go to a store, it's in Antwerp in Belgium, it's this Turkish bazaar that sells me fabrics, but the guys that sell it, they sometimes don't have an idea what they're selling, so they're selling me some kind of fabric that I don't really know anything about. So they just sell it to me, and I think, oh, this texture is so good, I want the texture. And in that case, I buy something like this, and I have absolutely no idea what it is. Does anyone make a guess what kind of material I could have bought? Yeah. Silk, yeah. Organza could have been as well. Any other guesses? Satin, yeah, it could all be these things. I think it's a polyester. It's just a polyester. It's some synthetic created material. It's often when you buy linen, they will charge you a lot of money for linen, and then afterwards you want to like bleach it or you want to dye it, and then at a certain point you realize that the linen is not really 100% linen and it's woven in with polyester fibers. So you got scammed. Normally that's the case, and sometimes if I go to a store and I see one fabric that is polyester, I normally shy away from it. I'm like, ugh, polyester, no. But then there is no other fabric in the store, and it's that one color that you want, and then you gotta get it, and then you gotta work around it. So what I just did is I just took a look at all the fabrics, and I've taken a list of how if it's good or not. So if you're using an authentic material, what are the positive things about it and what are the negative things? And if you have sometimes, in most cases, if you're using a fabric that has no clue, it is often the most budget-friendly choice. I mean, polyester, you can buy it for €3. You guys don't calculate in euros, do you? You can buy it for very, very cheap. And you have to always calculate in that there are other elements you have to work around. Buying special needles or buying a material as a medium to use it. It's all pretty, sometimes it's a lot more work if you buy the cheapest option. And sometimes the authentic material, even though it's the right material, your character sometimes doesn't flow the right way. For example, some characters have wrinkles in there or drapings in their costume, and a normal fabric would never, ever get that same shape. So you have to adjust it. Something to keep in mind, if you really want to take a picture of this, I'm going to explain it. It's too much words, I don't like words, and I guess you guys don't either. So, let's do a case study. We're in this together. I could just explain it to you, but I mean, we gotta think about it. If you guys think about it and think for a solution, we can solve it. For example, let's take a look at Tanjiro. Tanjiro, Demon Slayer is the time period in which Demon Slayer finds itself is the Taisho period, which is 1912 until 26. That is during the World War, yeah. So while the world is at war, Tanjiro just starts slaying demons. And something that's very interesting, if you just like doing a Wikipedia search, right, for the Taisho period, and especially the costume that Tanjiro wears, it is very interesting to see that the top part of Tanjiro's costume is inspired by European naval officers. So when Japan opened up for the, I guess Japan was a closed island for a very long time, and at a certain point they opened up to the Western society, to people from the West, from people with chips, they got very inspired by these strong English or American men wearing these very straight costumes, these very strong looking jackets, and the Japanese had a good idea of just taking that idea and making them into school uniforms or marine uniforms. Today, the sailor girls that we know, they are literally inspired by the Americans that came to Japan in their cool sailor outfit. So that's the reason why. And that's something that we can keep in mind when we want to look at Tanjiro. So if you want to establish which material to use for Tanjiro, for both his Hakama and for his normal traditional costume, we know that we can just look back at the history and choose the same material that they used at that time. Of course, he also wears the haori, the traditional Japanese garment, and the shoes, which are most likely inspired by the same period. Good. That's a lot of explanation. Let's do it together. So, for example, let's start with the haori, the outside shirt. Which material would you choose for the checkered pattern on the outside of Tanjiro's costume? Which material? I made it very difficult on you guys, right? You would choose cotton. And I applaud to you, sir, because cotton is indeed a good option. The Japanese would have used hemp, for example. Hemp was very available, not to smoke weed like the Dutch do, but to make garments. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm pointing you out because I know you're Dutch. But if, for example, you are unable to get any hemp, because, I mean, I've never really stood in a garment store or like in a clothing store and asked, is this material made from hemp? Mostly they sell cotton, and one that comes very close to it is indeed canvas cotton, which has the same texture. So you can use that. Good. I think it's now the white part. The white part, the inner lining of the costume. Which material would you use? Any estimated guesses? Normal lining these days. What would you use? Just lining fabric, I guess? Any guesses? You can't say anything wrong. I mean, I'm not going to score or evaluate you.
Well, going back in time, there weren't too many options. So if you're going to look for something period, it's going to be something like hemp and cotton again.
Got it. Exactly. See, that is the thinking that we needed. Okay. Now, I explained about you the... I mean, just give her an applause. Yes, good. Good job. No, it's that way of thinking that we really want to, like, awaken here. We want to catalyze that way of thinking. And then the most difficult one, these uniforms. Does anyone want to make a guess? It's not cotton, that's for sure. You would say linen, but linen is very flowy, so it's not that very straight and heavy. It's a very heavy fabric. Wool is a good alternative, although it wasn't that very much available. I think I could be totally wrong, but what my sources, when just going online, say is that it would be broadcloth. Absolutely no idea what it is. So I'm that guy that goes to a fabric store, has this nice piece of paper, and is like, please, could you help me find this kind of fabric? Sometimes it works, sometimes. And sometimes I just take a fabric that is very close to it. So, gotta find it out. Good, guys, good job. Okay, so we have established that. Now we know that if we use the right materials, we can already go on with it. Then we have wear and tear. Many characters in movies or series or anime, if they are in a fight or they have a battle or they're doing stuff that makes their clothes dirty, like go on a big journey, it always reflects throughout the costume. So, I'm going to give you a couple of tools and methods that you can use to realistically recreate that damage. It's called battle damage sometimes. These are the tools. Yeah. Picture time. Good job. Okay, picture time done. Um, wear and tear. For example, if you want to make a texture on foam, EVA foam, which you can buy at Cosplay Shop B, then you can use Dremel. It's a tool that you can definitely use, and that is very handy to create textures. There are people that are so skilled in using a Dremel that they can create curves that are impossible to create, and I still don't know how they do it. But it's a skill. You have to really learn how to use a Dremel properly. So watch tutorials for that and practice before doing this on your actual costume. For example, if you want to like roughen up your jeans or your pants, for example, if it has been used a lot or certain parts have been damaged, you can also do that. This is mostly for damage that is like that comes over time, especially at places that are under a lot of stress, which we will cover. You can burn it. You can literally burn your fabric. That's a good idea, unless it's polyester. So if you don't know what your fabric is, sometimes you think, "Ah, let's burn it. This will make a good effect, like a dragon has breathed fire on it and it has burned." And then you start burning your polyester, and then realizing that it's plastic on the inside, so it starts to burn up and curl and become one big black smudge. You don't want that. So test it out first. And if you use the heat gun and aluminum foil, you can also create some sort of leather texture in your foam, which is something that I also done on Dune on certain parts to create this like little indent to create more realism. And that's something that is also very interesting to do. And as I said before, always test out everything before going ham on your actual costume. You don't want to have your finished costume be ruined because you did you did a weathering that isn't supposed to be there. Okay. Up next, we're going to go to staining. So we've chosen the materials, we've made our costume, and yeah, I know making your costume is a big step, but there are other tutorials for that. It's not here today, so sorry to disappoint, but I'm explaining you the other steps. And then we have wear and tear. Of course, we are aging our costume, and then we're going to stain it. We're going to bring more color to it. And you can just go for it, or wait. And we also have to plan first. We have to plan first. If we don't plan first, this is gonna be a mess, and we don't want it to be a mess. And for that, I mean, a lot of people, they make the obvious decision of going nuts on a piece of armor by smudging some shoe polish on it or smudging some paint on it, and at a certain point, they look at their costume and they're like, that's pretty ugly. You don't want that. You don't never ever want that. Like you're like thinking, no, I've ruined the costume. I've made it. I have to clean it now, or I have to use some very complicated ways of cleaning it up, while it could be avoided by carefully planning it. And the biggest reason why people don't weather their costumes is because they're scared of ruining it, because you've put all the hard work into it. So I got 3 tools for you that I want to explain, so you guys can weather accordingly, which is dirt mapping, telling a story, and a version of detailed versus and controlled versus unique and chaotic. And for every costume, there are different methods that have to be used. So choose the one that you think is the best to use. It's too dark. I should have put a white background. Okay, dirt mapping. Dirt mapping is a visual tool that you can recreate by importing a picture into Photoshop or Illustrator or a drawing program, or just make a sketch that, you know, like if you put a photo, you print out a photo of yourself and then just hold a piece of paper against it and hold it against the window so you can trace it. If you do it that way, you have like an outline of your costume. That's something like this. This is the outline of the costume that I'm wearing today. So like a while ago, I just stood there for a picture, and then I just traced it. And once I have this visual overview of the colors, I went to the next step, and I made it darker on the inside. So I made certain spots darker. So the first step that I did with weathering is, of course, making my costume darker. making sure that the details would pop more. And then in the next step, you see that I've added more lighter parts, more highlights, more sand to the costume. And by doing this in these certain steps, like literally planning out this part needs to be dark, this part needs to be that color, and this part needs to be lighter, you can literally know how and in what ways you're going to weather your costume. And the result is something like this. You see here. This is Sekiro, a costume I wore a couple of weeks ago. And you see the gradient from the normal color to a darker color, to an extremely dark color, and on top, all the highlights of all the loam that is very reminiscent of the environment in which the character finds itself. This is a very interesting tool to use. It's very straightforward. You guys know what to do. This is just an idea so that you guys can plan ahead. There's no shame in taking your time. I mean, nobody has ever told you that you have to be a weathering master at the beginning of making a costume. This is something you learn. Telling a story. There are characters that you can tell a story with. There are characters that have no concrete idea of where the weathering needs to be. So if you're, for example, making a character from For Honor, which is this big knight that goes into battle, and they fight a lot. And they're playable characters, so everyone is unique. You can tell the story yourself. For example, you can say, okay, this guy has been stabbed in the side of his armpit, so I'm gonna make a huge blood stain at the armpit and destroy a part of the armpit. Or, as this guy here, he has caught a lot of arrows. The arrow points are gonna be, the points where the arrow penetrate the armor, they're gonna be made into the costume, and of course weathered according to that situation. And this will bring a story. This will show anyone that looks at your costume, this guy has character. This guy knows what he's doing, and he has been through a lot. So, that's one of the things that you can do. When I did C4, a big contest, there was a guy that I was participating with, and he walked very funny. There was a disability that he had, and he limped a little bit, and it was a normal thing. That's a normal thing. I kind of don't recognize that he limps, but every time that he went on stage, he still had this little limp, and people would see it. So what we did is we made a story around it. So we made a piece of armor that covered his leg, and then put a huge dragon tooth into it, so that if he would limp on the stage, people would think it's acting, while actually it's a normal condition. And with that, we're telling the story. Using some things that you can't do to your advantage is a very smart idea. You're telling a story. And that's what we did. And people appreciated it, because they thought he was a really good actor. So, then we have detailed versus controlled, and unique versus chaotic. And that's kind of a... I'm showing you a mind map because it goes into 4 different ways of doing it. And we're going to start with the detailed and controlled, and then we're going to take a look at accurate designs. These are designs that exist, that have clear weathering, and that have weathering that are already discussed with the production department of that movie or that series. Good example is Doctor Strange. Why Doctor Strange? Because I cosplayed him, and it's a good example, I guess. You see that he goes through a lot of things during the movie. And something that I did personally is that, because in in Infinity War, at a certain point, they land on the planet Titan, and they just spend a lot of time on Titan. So what I did is, when I weathered Doctor Strange, I made sure that there was orange Titan dust throughout my costume. So if you would look at the bottom side of my shoes, you would see there is orange dust that has accumulated in the cracks because he was on that planet. And the judges at the ECG, they were like, whoa, that is a smart detail. A very little detail that can bring character to your costume. So that's a very interesting thing to do, because you have all the tools available. You know what happens in the movie. You know what happens with the character, so you can weather accordingly. Okay, up next, it's very important to know where dirt accumulates. It is very intensive, because you have to look at every scene and try to investigate why. If a certain character is being picked up by a tentacle and it's very slimy, make sure that area is very slimy as well. Yes, we all know what I'm talking about. Good. Then we have, so the previous one is dynamic weathering. This is like a thing that changes over time and that you can build up throughout certain parts of the movie. But static weathering, especially with video game characters, these characters are weathered in one frame only. So they will never get any dirtier, but they are weathered. There is dirt accumulated. So you take a freeze frame from the character, a good picture of pictures that have the right weathering, and weather it according to the picture. It's very easy, and it doesn't involve a lot of research. And it's fast and quick, of course. Good. Then we're going to look at unique and chaotic. And one of my favorite techniques that I love to use is an action replay. So you and your friends, if you or your own, you and your friends, you decide to recreate a battle and make it in such a way that your costume becomes dirty. And these could be, well, we're not going to fight with real swords. We don't want actual blood on it, but we can use a substitute, such as a giant paintbrush. So this is the thing that we did. I still vividly remember this being in my own backyard, and we were standing there with both our armors, and we were dipping with our paintbrush in a can of paint, and literally fighting each other with a paintbrush until blood and mud has spat onto our costumes and our faces. It was a very weird bonding moment, but we had a good costume afterwards. Absolutely. So this is the thing you can do. And for example, if it's like dirt, or for example, you at a certain point you kneel because the battle was too intense, your knee has touched the ground. So what we did is we stood back up and put a map of dust underneath, and then just did the action again, and then stood up, did like we whipped it off, and pretended like it didn't happen. But the costume got dirtier and dirtier that way, and in that way we weathered it. It's a crazy thing to do, but it's a technique. If for certain characters, it's very handy. And then there is also one thing, and that is winging it. And this is literally going ham on your costume and not planning anything, just going nuts on it. It can look very wonky, very fast. People that have done this on multiple times, weathering, they already know the steps, but some people, they can go weathering and then they have to just paint all over again because it looks very weird. And we want to avoid a lot of weathering. But a good way for when you want to use this is, for example, monster suits. I think if I zoom into the picture, you can see that all the little veins, they're all weathered so that they look more monstrous, more dirty. We also put glycerin on it, so it looked, glycerin is this material you use for electronic vapors. We used it because in the Alien movies, they used the same material to make them like drool and make them all wet. So at the, I think it was Euro Cosplay, we made it all wet to make sure that it looked extra moist and dirty and monstery. So that's kind of the thing that we did with winging it. It's a good thing for monsters, organic things, and especially objects that are not really, don't have to be accurate. Okay, but how? How do you stain? Well, what tools do you use? What material do you use? You can use many materials. I'm just going to go over them because I think it needs a more clear explanation how to best stain it. We got, of course, acrylic paints, which can be applied raw. They can be thinned down and can be dry brushed, and they have all different ways of solving stuff. For example, like at the top, you can just do a raw application. You can just paint it on, and it will look good. Sometimes it won't look good if it's painted on because it would be too clear. So you're going to water it down and then smudge it on your pieces of fabric, so that the fabric that looks very white here is going to look very dirty here. And that's something that you can do. Or you can dry brush all the tiny details so it looks more metallic. Okay. A product that I like to use is fashion spray. A paintbrush is very linear, so you can paint on it and there is a stroke on it. And people, if you keep on stroking it, at a certain point people will start to realize that it has been painted, and you want to get rid of the illusion that you've applied paint. So we're going to use a spray bottle to, instead of having linear strokes, having like very separated spritzes everywhere on top of your costume. And then it looks more realistic, especially for like example sweat stains. If you want to create some sweat stains on your costume that have to be like watery, why don't you use a watery product? The same is with fabric dye. You can also dye your fabric. One of the contestants today used fabric dye to create a certain illusion. I think it was the Rengoku that like dipped his fabric into different colors to create a certain gradient and a certain illusion. And that's a good idea that you can do that. But you can also create your own fashion spray in that same way. So if you can't find the color in fashion spray, you can create your own color with a fabric dye and use the spray bottle to also spray your costume and make it darker. Alcohol markers, most definitely, they are a good method for detailed application. So for example, for dandelion, I used some foil, some flock foil to create a certain gradient, but these flowers look very flat to me. So what I did is I used a pro marker to literally etch out and create more depth into the flowers. Do you think that was a good idea? It was an improvement, right? It's like this depth you want to create in everything in your costume, as much as possible. Yeah, let's go. Pigment sticks, also a good solution. They're more powdery. So paint is very liquidy. You see, it is very wet, and it can create dry streaks or dried up spots. But if you really want to have this dry effect, you can use pigmented sticks. Or you can use cheap makeup. Go to your dollar store, buy the cheapest makeup, and use that as a weathering tool. I'm sorry, Keiko, I know I've used your makeup panel multiple times for this, but I'm gonna buy cheaper stuff. A chalk paint, also very handy. It's a very crusty paint. It's very thick paint, and it will leave very heavy spatters, and it will also increase the weight of your costume. In some cases, that might be a solution, but as I told you before, try it out. Powders are also interesting. With metal powders, you can paint certain parts to make an oxidation effect or give it more color, and with powders, pigmented powders, which are normally used to mix up paints, you can use that to also apply them straight to the fabric, not dilute them with any medium, straight apply them to the fabric to create a very dusty and very natural sandy effect, which I use for Dune, but I'll come to that. Yep. Yeah, to glue, to buff, or to oxidize. With powders, a good example is what I did for Sekiro. Is I had 3 steps where I painted my pieces of Sintra, which are the shin covers in front of the armor. I painted them with Flexi Paint. And Flexi Paint is a very sticky paint. It sticks. If you touch it while drying, it might be that you peel off everything just by touching the paint, which is a very dangerous paint, and I don't like to use it. A lot of people like to use Flexi Paint for this, just like Flexi Paint as a primer, but it's very dangerous that you just touch it and then it sticks to your finger and you lose parts of the primer. However, if you apply powder on top of it, you kind of close the stickiness and the powder will be on top of the sticky surface. It's like powdering down your makeup. You're putting it in place. But now we're putting the powder in place. And if we apply Platina Rust, which is a chemical solution from Cosplay Shop, you can create this realistic looking effect, and you can create real rust. And you can really go in overdrive with this. I've not gone in overdrive, but if you would cover the whole surface in that Platina Rust, you bet this will look brown and very, very rusty. You can also use oil paints and dilute it using white spirit, but beware, very toxic, very dangerous. But in miniatures, that's often used when you can create, like if you look at the scepter here, you can give some very flat surfaces that are like in monotone colors. You can make it darker so that there is more detail that pops. And that's why you use oil paints in a lot of cases. If it's very detailed and very small, you can definitely use oil paint and then like grease it out a little bit. And eventually, if you fix the oil paint, it's all gonna be fine. But it will create a different effect. Scenting. This is one of the last things that we're going to do, but why are you going to bring smell to your costume? Why? Why in God's name? Who has the idea, the audacity to bring smell to your costume? Me. But not only me, other people as well. For example, when I went to a convention, I think it was Facts a couple of years ago, it was in Belgium, there was this cosplay guest from France. And I went to take a picture with him. It was David Chan, I think. I went to take a picture with him, and he was dressed as Oswald Cobblepot from Batman. And I came close to him for a picture. And then I smelled rotten fish. Or something like that. Afterwards, I asked what it was, and it was very heavy cologne, a very thick cologne, a very manly cologne that was like, that gave me this expression. Oh, presentation, please work. Oh, this expression. But in the same time, it also gave me an idea. It was like, this is a very interesting thing to do. Giving a smell, this is something I still remember to this day. The same smell, it gave me an experience. I was like, damn, this guy actually is the character. I mean, also Cobblepot in the movie, he eats raw fish for breakfast because it's, I guess it's his character or something that he does. But having that smell, even though it was not rotten fish, it was more like a heavy cologne, it gave me that idea and it gave me the experience. A cookie monster that smells like cookie. Yeah, you didn't forget about it, did you? Oh, I had the same occurrence with smell when I think a couple of years ago, before the Euro Cosplay Finals, I had a garage fire and my costume was in a garage fire. And yeah, this is a simulation of the garage fire. So at a certain point, I was like, yeah, costume is smelling very badly. This is, it's done. People are gonna be disgusted by it because they smell it. And I wore it to the finals, and I came into the room of the judges, and I stepped in smelling like smoke still, because even though it was many weeks later, the smoke was still lingering in the costume. I stepped into the judges' room, and the judges were very impressed because they were like, whoa, what's that smell? And they were investigating it further. And at a certain point, they were like, wait, so you literally put smell into it? Because you literally smell like a monster. And I'm like, yeah. An accident. But what did it give the jury? An experience. And that's what we're wanting to do today. Adam Savage in his TED Talk says the same thing. Give an experience. We as cosplayers at a convention, we give an experience. We know our characters through and through. The things that make us happy, and we share them with one another. In his TED Talk, he was cosplayed as a no face, and then people interacted with him in the way as they would do with no face from the anime. And I think that's such a beautiful thing that makes us cosplayers is sharing the experience with one another. So if you're not doing it for big contest, do it for the experience. Be the cookie monster that smells like cookies. Okay, how do you do this? There are a couple of methods, and we're going to cover them all, and then afterwards I'm going to give you a little quiz so I know you guys know what we're talking about. So an idea of how to implement smell is sachets of potpourri. Of course, you can always create them yourselves by either using essential oils, herbs or flowers, depending on the situation that you want to work with. And you can just sew them into your costume, and it will reek of the smell that you've put into your costume. Sew them in, as I've showed here. Incense is also a very interesting way of doing certain parts. You can literally smoke your own costume to give it this Nepalese temple smell. For Doctor Strange, I use it because he is spending most of his time in the first movie in Kathmandu, which is the capital of Nepal, and he is of course training in a Buddhistic temple. or at least I think a Buddhistic temple. So what I did is I bought this very cheap closet from IKEA. I hung my costume in that closet, and underneath in the closet I have burned an incense so that my costume would reek of that character. Later I realized that there are multiple smells of incense, and that no, you can only use lavender, but you can also use frankincense and this and that these also have meanings. So if you could tell a judge, like, yeah, I use this kind of incense because it has purifying properties, and my character is all about purification and blah 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 blah, then use that kind of thing, and also show it. It gives a certain smell. You either smell like a church or you either smell like a Buddhistic temple. There is quite a big difference. Okay. Oh yeah, be aware, it's a fire hazard. Just never leave this unattended. Your costume might go into flames. Just a safety hazard. Good. Soap packages. So if you go to your local Chinese store, you can find rose packages. We find them, I mean, in the Netherlands and in Belgium, we find them in Chinatown. We get them there, and then they smell very fun. So we can also use them, and just when you transport the costume, put them in. Put these soap packages in your transportation modules. Such a fancy word. In your transportation bags, clothing transportation bags. Let's go for that. You put them in these bags, and then at a certain point you pull them out at the convention, and your costume will smell like that the whole day. I guarantee you. Oh yeah. And of course the easiest one, the one that we would all grab to, is perfume. But as we all know, expensive, very expensive. But there are solutions for that, because you can also buy these small ones, so you have one for every cosplay. But which perfume do you use? It's always like weird. Like you can go into your local perfumery, and you can't go to the cashier and ask, I want that kind of smell. I want to smell like Oswald Cobblepot. This is gonna be weird. This is gonna be a very disappointing conversation. But I'm gonna help you and give you the tools how to use how to choose the right perfume. There are a lot of studies that have been created to just about smell, and that help a lot of marketing researchers in their quest for finding the right smell to keep people in their stores. But as cosplayers, we have to just know that there are certain concentrations that, for example, if you use an eau de cologne, it is not very strong, it's not very perfumed, so that means that if you wear an eau de cologne, which is a perfume that is cheaper than all the others, it will only linger for 2 hours. While if you use a pure perfume, then you can be sure that it will stay up to 6 to 8 hours. Which is something that you have to keep in mind if you buy perfume. I know it's expensive, but choose the right one. Because if you use a eau de cologne, you will reek of the character the first 2 days, the first 2 hours, and smell of sweat the next. Good. Michael Edwards has given me the fragrance wheel, not personally, but just found it online. And in this wheel, this is very complex, right? It's very easy to just establish 4 important smells, which is the floral scents, the oriental scents, the woods, and the fresh smells. Now, if we go and take a look at the floral smells, these are smells, especially situated in the upper left corner. These smell of freshly cut flowers, and especially if they have a powdery note to them, and they remind us, our minds, to spring and summer and these very happy times where we all want to be in the sun. And there are characters that definitely smell the same way. Can anyone give me a character that is very happy and bright and reminds you of a floral scent? Eris Gainsborough, yeah, from Final Fantasy. She's a flower girl. Of course, she smells very flowery. Good. Any else? Any other suggestions? A fairy, Tinkerbell, yeah? She would smell like florals. Yeah, okay. Then we have the Oriental Smells. These are the rich, the exotic smells that indicate luxury. people that are very luxurious, that have these, I mean, characters with the big egos, they can definitely use the Oriental Smells, especially because of their luxurious views. Which character? 5 minutes? Okay, I'm gonna rush through it. Which character would you give the Oriental Smell? Any ideas? Jasmine from Aladdin. Very luxurious. Yeah. Any other suggestions? Medusa? Indeed. Medusa from One Piece. As indeed a good thing. Ningguang from Genshin Impact? Give her the same. Absolutely. Okay, then we have Woods. Those are the very warm characters. I prefer to call the Woods the big papa bears, the big Canadian men that are very kind. Can anyone give me a character? Totoro? Totoro gives me a wood smell as well. And then the fresh smell, the very bright, clear, the very youthful smells. Anyone? A water spirit could be a fresh one, yeah. Any other suggestion? It's a difficult one, right? Yeah. Okay, let's keep it a water spirit then. Go. Okay, let's do a case study. The final case study. I have cosplayed Dandelion, which is a beautiful picture here. And when I left to Volta, I asked a friend of mine if I could use some of his perfume. And I was also searching for a very flowery one. And also, of course, a luxurious one or a fresh one, and I was very confused. And he gave me one specific perfume. Now, I'm going to tell you what perfume it is, but I want you guys to guess first, which smell would you give to Dandelion? We have floral, we have woods, we have oriental, and we have fresh. You would give floral. Yeah. Anyone else? Another smell? You have a mix of? Oriental and floral. And you? Oriental and floral. Very luxurious, very floral. Good. And what I did is, indeed, I went to look at floral, and I got a very sweet, which is a girl perfume, I think from Versace. And then, no, I don't know what it is from, but very sweet. That was a perfume. We used that one, and it worked out. It definitely worked out, and people also were like, "Wait, is this?" Yeah, you look like Dandelion and you smell like Dandelion. That's an experience. Good. And then one to rule them all. Always wear deodorant. Good. Okay, so did we provide the total experience? That's my real question. Did we provide the total experience? Yeah? Oh, what say that again? Yeah, we forgot the sounds. Haha, I got you there. Okay, so we forgot the sound. We've covered touch with material, we've covered look, of course, and we've covered smell. But sound is a tricky one, and a very tricky one at that, because you can only use it when necessary. And what do I mean with that is, for example, the Fallout Ranger. In Fallout, I always play with the music on, with the radio on. Why do I do this? Is you're a straight up psychopath if you don't. Nobody wants to play a game without any cool music, right? So this character also does it, and people at the convention, if they wear a Pip-Boy, most of the Pip-Boys play radio, and that's kind of, some people find it very weird, but I think it's the full experience. It's a very good idea, until 20 Fallout Rangers stand next to one another and play the same song over and over. Then it gets messy. Another interesting character is Esmerelda. She both has a tambourine and she has the slings on her skirt that definitely give more vibes to it. And people also be like, they will hear you coming from a distance. And then a very iconic idea, some characters are very iconic. For example, Darth Vader. He makes his breathing sound. If you don't have any Darth Vader without his breathing apparatus, it's not Darth Vader. Good. Ladies and gentlemen, you finished your training course and become a master in adding a touch of mystery to your costume. I sincerely hope that these tips help you and that they can help you bring your characters to life. If anything is unclear, or if you want to take another look at the PowerPoint, feel free to give me any questions at my social media. You can just find me under the hashtag @Mistvein, which is very shameless that I do this, and just ask me any questions if necessary. I don't mind helping you guys out. I've done the research, and probably I will come back to my opinions as well. But if I can help you guys, I would love to. Good. Thank you very much, and I hope you all enjoyed.